Hello everyone, welcome back. I am Fer, and this is Deciphering Phyrexian, the Praetor special. And this video, like all my videos, past, present, and future, is brought to you by my Patreons, which right now is just Otium Otiosum. Otium, thank you. Also, I want to announce that this Wednesday 26 at 4 p.m. Central Time, I'm going to be making a live stream where I try to decipher Phyrexian live. Specifically, I'm going to try to tackle pronunciation because I haven't made a video about pronunciation since the start of this series. And there are some new things in the words from these cards and some new ideas I've had that I think can finally help us to crack the pronunciation of several words. So the link to my Twitch is in the description, as well as the link to my Patreon if you want to join. Also, my Twitch account has nothing on it right now. It looks pretty bare, but that's the account I'm gonna use. So anyway, let's try to decipher today the card for Urabrask. And for that, let's first look at the English version. Urabrask the Hidden, legendary creature, Praetor. Creatures you control have haste. Creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. And the flavor text reads, when the Miran resistance arrived, the Fornance dwellers looked to Urabrask for guidance. His decree stunned the others. Let them be. Oh, that's pretty cool. I think that as the story of Magic the Gathering moves forward, and either we go back to New Phyrexian, or either the Phyrexians go to other planes, I think eventually Urabrask is going to betray the other Praetors. Because, I mean, we see that he already, or she, I don't know, they already have some kind of tendencies like piety, which is not very common in Phyrexians. So I'm not saying that he's going to be redeemed, and I'm not saying that he's going to have a redemption arc. I don't think redemption is possible, but yeah, whatever happens is going to be interesting. Also, just a reminder that I cut the text and I arranged it in the way it would be in universe. Okay, so now let's check it out. We begin. Oh, also, instead of using the orange that I normally use, because this card has a red tint to it, I'm gonna be using blue. First, we have the name, Urabrask. And in fact, this name is I think the best clue we have to conclude that this is supposed to be like a glottal stop, because otherwise it seems that the name for Urabrask should start with a vowel and not a consonant. Then we have the hidden one. And you might remember from the previous videos that we had found a particle. Let me write it here. This is the consonantal root for... This is a consonantal root that we suspect turns nouns into adjectives. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, something like this. And so you would expect this root, these consonants, to be somewhere in here if we are turning the verb to hid into hidden. But as you can see, this root is not here. So perhaps that's the difference between, I don't know, like hither, the one who hits, and hidden, the one who is hidden, the one who does the action, and the ones who receives the action. The participle and the... Actually, I don't know what would be the linguistic terminology for this. But yeah, that's... And so perhaps the last part of this word is the verb hidden, or to hid, and then the start is some participle or something. So that's something to consider and remember. Then we have legendary creature, Praetor. We know that this is the root for creature. And then let me zoom in. First, we begin with the present tense marker. That's nice and familiar. Love to see it. Then we have the possessive, your. Also nice to see it. And then we have, let me check my notes. Okay, then we have control. This is control. It appears with a weird consonant at the end. I mean, we have seen the word control in other examples before. And sometimes it has this consonant at the end, others it doesn't. So at some point I have to compare all the instances of the word control in their context to figure out what's going on here. But right now we just know that this is control. Let's see, what's the next word? Well, of course, it is just a present tense marker again, nice and familiar. And then we have creatures, and this one is even in plural, so that's nice. Creatures, creatures. And then we have in the second column, oh well, it begins with the ability marker. We don't exactly know what's the literal translation of this word, but we know that its usage is very consistent. It marks abilities like immortality or trample, or in this case, haste. Also, the whatever is this, I think it's way too complex for it to be a single root. So I suspect that maybe it has maybe quick and go or something like that somewhere in here. But right now we just know that this is haste. And then we have finally, this is of course the verb. We know that in Phyrexian the verbs pretty much always appear at the end of sentences. And so if we look at the English card, so creatures you control have haste. Okay, so that's interesting, because this is not the first time we see this word in Phyrexian. We have also seen it in the card for Elish Norn, when it says that the creatures you control get +2/+2. Or at least in English it says they get +2/+2, but here in the card for Urabrask it says that they have haste. Now what I am making emphasis on this, because it's interesting that we seem to have two English words, have and get, which, I mean, you can see that they are somewhat related. If you got something, then you have it, right? And it's interesting to see that these two words are being translated into a single word in Phyrexian, which is this one. And so, actually, maybe I should put the arrow up. Yeah, now it makes more sense. Now, and this is interesting because when you see how languages translate different words, it can give you a better look at how they work. For example, and I don't know if I have mentioned this before, but in English you have do and make, but in Spanish we only have hacer. And it was actually very hard for me to know when I should use one or the other one, because for me, like, they are both saying the same thing. Now I eventually managed to understand the difference, but even then, when some of my friends who speak English, well, whose native language is Spanish and are learning English or something, ask me what's the difference, it's very hard for me to explain. And so, well, I don't know. It's just when I saw this similarity between have and get, it reminded me of what happens in Spanish to do and make, and that kind of insight is the kind of thing that helps you eventually understand the language. So, well, now let's move on to the third column. We have a very weird tense marker here. And yeah, I perhaps something like when. I mean, again, eventually I'm gonna look at all of these new tense markers and I'm gonna analyze them individually. But right now, we just know that this is when. And here it's funny because this is the possessive, again, your. And then we have opponent, which is a word we have seen many times before. But this is weird, and let me explain why. Because in many other cards, like in the one for Elish Norn that I just showed you, in the card for Boring Clicks or whatever, they mentioned your opponents, but they never put the possessive in the Phyrexian translation. They always mention like when opponent, and I guess it's understood from context that they are referring to your opponents of the player. And yet here they specify that. I don't know if there's a grammatical reason for that. If maybe like someone like a native speaker of Phyrexian would find this completely natural, or if maybe the translators, I don't know, maybe it's a difference in style or something like that. I don't know, but this is suspicious that we had never seen the phrase "your opponent" specifically written up to now. So that's something to remember and just keep in mind. well, in your opponent, and then we have again control. Again with this consonant that doesn't appear in other instances. Control, and then let's see, let me check my notes. When your opponent's control, present tense, of course. And then we have a creature in singular. Next, we have this whole thing that is just a single word, and it's pretty big. Let me put it in circles so that you can see it clearly. Also, keep in mind that here there is a gap that actually, let me erase it because I think yeah, as you can see, there's a gap in the line, and I think that's going to be relevant soon. But now let's just analyze what this huge word is doing here. First of all, we have seen the beginning of this word many times before. In fact, in the Vorinclex Monstrous Rider, which is the newest Phyrexian card, was the newest Phyrexian card up to this new batch we got, we had seen from that card that this meant something like on, or perhaps place, or something like that. So that's interesting. And then we have things that we don't know. But then it's interesting that we have seen this part here before. This means zone, or at least, okay, I think it means zone because it is used a lot of times to referring to exile, the library, or stuff like that. And so in the rules of Magic, you can see that they are referred to the different zones where a card can be in the game. So, and all of these different words always have this. So I think this is the sort of root that is being modified by other things. And so, since we know that this is talking about the battlefield, perhaps this is battle or fight. And so perhaps this whole thing would be on the battle zone, which makes sense. And then we have this space here, and then we have this thing here that I suspect is the imperative marker. And actually, the more I talk, originally I was very confused by this, but the more of these videos I make and the more I look at it, the more I'm convinced that this is the imperative marker. And finally, we have the word for tap, which, by the way, we figured out from the card for Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger. And so let's look. We have all the rules text in this card. We have present tense, your control present tense creatures, ability of haste, get. So that it's interesting, and it's interesting to see that they use the present tense twice. Like, it's important to say that the creatures you are controlling in that moment. So, I don't know, this is the fact that it is used twice, and they used the tense markers in other interesting situations that deserve a lot more analysis. But that has to be for another video. Let's because otherwise this would be too long. But now let's look at this. It says when your opponent control present creature on battle zone, it's an order tap. And so, yeah, you can see that, okay, so you have to tap a creature when it enters the battlefield if your opponent controls it, okay. So far, actually, these two sentences were very easy to translate. I think most of the words here, we have already seen them before, I think, except for battle and this tense marker. And yeah, everything else, we had already seen it. So that's nice. Because that means that our translation work is paying off to the point that we can recognize many new things. Recognize many things when we see it in new circumstances. But now let's tackle the flavor text. And the flavor text starts with this very weird tense marker, which, I don't know, it doesn't look like this other tense marker. Let's look at the English version. What it says. The English version starts the flavor text specifically with when. So, I don't know. Perhaps this is used for telling stories. It wouldn't be that crazy for a language to have a tense marker specifically for telling stories. So, this is another one of those tense markers I have to analyze in depth in the future. And then we know that it is talking about, first remember that we know that Phyrexian has a SOB word order. This is very important for when we don't know what's going on. And in this case, we can expect that the first word in the sentence should be the subject. And it is talking about the Miran resistance, so this word here should be Miran resistance. And indeed, if we look at the beginning here, this looks a lot like the word for Mirodin we have seen before. It has the R-O-D-N. The weird thing is that then that means that this line is working as an M. But the in Mirodin, in the when we saw the name for Mirodin in other instances, it starts with this letter. But then we have also seen this letter at the beginning of the word mana, which makes me suspect that it sounds like an M. But then what is this one doing here? Okay, so that's a little preview of what's going to happen in the live stream of Wednesday. But whatever what's going on here, this is something like Mirodin. Okay? And then, well, this should be resistance. But of course, it's not that simple, because here we have this letter, which is a remarkably unusual letter. We had seen it in very few instances, but here it is. So I don't know what to make of it. Also, again, this is way too long for it to be just a single root. So it has to be at least two different words. And so I don't know how you would make resistance. Well, it's not that I cannot imagine it. It's just there are many ways to convey the meaning of resistance with two or more words. So, in fact, okay, actually, let me think. Maybe battle, fight? Well, they begin with the same consonant, and then they have this thing, but then, no. I thought for a second that maybe the root for fight or battle would be in here. But doesn't seem like that's the case. Would have been cool though. But anyway, this is the resistance. So this is the Miran resistance. And then what do we have here? Well, this is a word that, okay, up to this point, with the knowledge we have, we don't know what it means. And the same is true for this word and this word. But, oh, hey, here we see something familiar. This is Urabrask. So that's nice. That's the name of the character in the story, Urabrask. Okay, and then we have what else do we have here? Well, this word that we don't know what this is, but interestingly, we can see that this is a plural. So this must be a noun. And if we remember what the card says, it says that when the Miran resistance arrived, the furnace dwellers. So furnace dwellers is in plural. So that makes me think that if this is in plural, then it makes sense that this is referring to the furnace dwellers. Which I'm just going to create furnace dwellers, something like that. Okay, so that's nice. And then we have the end of the sentence. And since this is Phyrexian, the end of the sentence pretty much must be a verb. And the flavor text says that the furnace dwellers looked to Urabrask. So it makes sense to assume that this verb at the end of this sentence means looked. Also, just in case you are wondering, like, hey, that's not the end, there's more. We can see here, this is the symbol that they put always at the end of sentences. So that's how we know. Let's try to look at the other words here. So we have that tense, Miran, resistance, furnace dwellers looked, and Urabrask. So the words we are missing is like look for guidance. So, and actually, this is what we call a compound sentence. So it is talking when the Miran resistance arrived, that's one sentence. And actually, the end of that sentence would be perhaps here. So perhaps this is arrived. I'm not entirely sure that's the case, because we have also seen Phyrexians split sentences in weird ways. So there's even the possibility that this verb here is not look, but rather arrived. That would be weird to put the end of this sentence at the end of the whole thing, but we have seen the Phyrexians do similar things before. But for now, let's assume that this is arrived. And so the only thing we are missing is for guidance. And then we have this very short word here. And as always, a word that is short in one language, you can expect it to be short in any language. For things I actually mentioned in the other video, that there is this, the speaker wants to communicate as easily as possible, and the listener wants to understand as easily as possible. And like there's this back and forth that ends up producing that common words are short most of the time, and uncommon words can be longer. So all of this is to say that I think this is like 2 or 4, and then perhaps this would be guidance. So yeah, guidance, and then we would have that tense marker, mirroring resistance arrived, guidance to Urabrask, furnace dwellers looked. And actually, okay, now that I read it like that, I'm kind of suspecting that I got the right word order, because in German they tend to have one word order, but when they have two sentences together, like a compound sentence, the second part switches the order of some things. And so yeah, it makes sense that the subject, so basically Phyrexians are switching from SOB to OSB. And how does German does it? Let me remember. So in German is SBO, but then when you have a compound sentence, the second sentence changes to VSO, I think. Tell me in the comments if I'm wrong. But what is true is that German does do something like this. So it's not that crazy that Phyrexian would do something like this. Huh. I actually, this is not in my notes. This is just I had not noticed this up to this point. But anyway, let's look at what happened then. We have a tense marker. This is a very simple tense marker that we had never seen before. But I think this is perhaps something like past tense. It would make sense, because if we look at the flavor text, his decree stunned the other. So this is in past tense. This is something that Urabrask did at some point in the past. So if this is, it makes sense that this tense marker is a past tense marker. Also, we have this weird thing here in the middle of the sentence. Let me address it right now. Actually, we saw this weird punctuation mark in the card for Jinkitaxians for that dash. And people told me in the comments how it was called and what it was used for. And I read it and I thanked them, and I don't remember. I guess I had to check it again. Also, another very interesting thing is this. Let me redo that. This is very interesting for this reason. All Phyrexian sentences we have seen up to this point always start with this line, and they always end with this line like this. This is the first time we are seeing something start with a line like this. And I think this is meant to symbolize, like, this is like a quotation mark, I think. Because look, here they are quoting Urabrask. His decree stunned the others, let them be. And this is in quotes. So perhaps what we are looking here, the beginning, when a sentence starts like this, perhaps that means that that's a quote. And in fact, this sentence, as you can see, ends with this thing that I suspect might be an imperative tense marker. And so, yeah, this would be what? Let them be? And here is where, okay, in English, you use the word let for a lot of very weird things. In Spanish, we don't have an equivalent like that because we use the subjunctive, for example. Which I don't want to get too much into linguistic terminology. But I don't think that whatever is going on here is a verb like let. I think perhaps this maybe translates to peace or alone. So, sorry, alone. So I think that maybe what this sentence is saying is like an order to be at peace or an order to leave someone alone. Yeah, I mean, so at this point it's hard to tell, but let's try to figure out the rest of the sentence. We know that, okay, so this is a quote, so we can take it like a separate sentence all by itself. So that means that we have here like a somewhat independent sentence. So that, for my point in saying that is that maybe we can expect the verb to be at the end, as would in any normal sentence, and maybe this would be stunned. And then based on this SVO, sorry, this is from German, the SOV word order of Phyrexian. The first we would expect the subject. I don't know what's going on with me today. So this would be decree. Of course, I'm not entirely convinced by this, because the word here for stunned is way too long, and decree is kind of short. So perhaps this could be this word here could be stunned, and this could be his decree, and perhaps somewhere in here is the possessive for his, or hers, or theirs, or something like that. But at this point, we don't know, and this is my best guess. So it's basically past tense, decree, stunned, peace, order. Seems reasonable enough. And so yeah, it's interesting this card for Urabrask, because at the beginning we knew everything. Everything was words we had seen before. We had confidence for everything, but then when we get to the flavor text, we are so confused. We don't even know what word order. Sorry, what word order we are using here. So it's very confusing. We have a very easy part and a very confusing part. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if in the near future I realize that I'm very wrong in the decipherment of this flavor text. But that's how it goes sometimes. And so that's it for today. Remember that thanks for staying until the end. Please consider joining my Patreon if you want to support me and what I do. Don't forget that on Wednesday at 4 p.m. we're gonna have that live stream. Most of that, I'm looking forward to reading your comments and see if you guys can help me, and together we can advance a lot faster than we would by ourselves. And so yeah, don't forget to wear your seatbelt, eat healthily. If you're diabetic, don't forget to check your sugar. And also try to learn an instrument. Music is beautiful, and you can learn, doesn't matter how old you are. And don't forget to be happy.